everybody, and welcome back to Doula School. I am so excited to have Zoe with me today. Hi, Zoe. Say hi to everybody at Doula School YouTube
Hey,
channel.
Stephanie. So nice to see you.
Thanks, and thanks for having us. So, folks, I'm really excited for you to be part of this chat I'm going to have with Zoe today. Zoe is actually a birth and postpartum doula who is working on my team while living in Toronto. And Zoe is now back in Australia and has invited me to come on down under and do a doula training. And so I'm doing that. That's coming up. So any of you folks out there from Australia who've been waiting for a DONA International Doula Training, I'm coming to your backyard soon, so pay attention. But for everybody else, really, we're just going to chat about what it felt like for Zoe to take the training, to begin working as a doula, and that whole experience, and just kind of some of those common questions. And so those of you that are just thinking about taking a doula training, doesn't have to be the Australia training, but if you're thinking about taking a doula training, I think you might really like this conversation. So Zoe, I would love for you to just start by introducing yourself, who you are, and how you decided to come to doula work and what that experience has been like for you.
Yeah, great. So my name is Zoe. I did start with yourself, Stephanie, training in Toronto. It was during COVID, so we were virtual. But now, obviously, there's a lot more in-person trainings, which is just so cool. Such a nice asset to have. I actually used to be a private flight attendant, nothing to do with doula work, but I always had a passion for photography. So I always had my camera with me. I was always doing travel photography, and I really always had this passion for and wanting this sort of urge to explore photography prenatally, doing pregnancy shoots, and doing a lot of my friends and family had like babies, that sort of thing. So I sort of started to move into that area. I started Milk and Blossom, my perinatal business. At the time, I just was really obsessed with photography, and I thought, okay, I really want to photograph a birth. So a girlfriend of mine in Switzerland was having a baby, and she called me up and said, can you photograph my birth? So I did that, and I was sort of an accidental doula for her birth. Loved it, fell in love. And not too long after that, I thought, okay, I need to add doula work to my practice. And that has since become my mainstay. So I started my training with you. I didn't know much about doula work when I started, but I knew it was something I kept getting asked, almost more than the photography, and being able to provide sort of support during that time as well as the memories. So I quickly fell into that, and living in Toronto, I got a lot of clients, more than I could meet up with, really, to be honest. And then that was just fantastic. From there, I also did the postpartum training through the Doula School, which was just the perfect add-on. I ended up sort of doing that, which really complements birth. I think you can sort of do that in between or while your clients are expecting. And so doing a lot of little overnights with cute babies and just helping mums adjust, and new parents, dads, all types of people just in Toronto that had different circumstances, different birth stories, but all very sleep deprived and in need of support. So that was a really special time. And since then, I've gone on to create a birth app, and doing a lot more photography, things like that. So yeah, and we also did the TENS training. I added that. I did that with you as well, and that has been super helpful. So yeah, now I'm back in Sydney, really excited to just invite more people into that journey that I've had. It's really been life affirming, purpose affirming. So I think there's just such a demand here, and that's just been my journey so far. I'm also 30 weeks pregnant. You can't see my belly right now, but the first thing I did was book a doula when I found out I was pregnant. So yeah, certainly I see the value in it.
Yeah. And I think your story is a really great representation of how a lot of people who become birth workers, they imagine one aspect of birth work, like maybe they just know about birth doulas and they just imagine doing only that. But you're a great example. And what we often talk about and teach is like, there's so many different ways to be a birth doula. There's so many different things we can do and we can add on. And we just kind of have to figure out our rhythm and what area do we like. You know, maybe we start off with birth and then we add on postpartum, or like you add on photography or something completely different. And there's just so much potential, really. There's a lot of potential to make it whatever you want it to be. And sometimes it's once we dip our toe in that we start to realize, oh, I really like this aspect, but I only want one client a month like this. But maybe I'll take, you know, 2 more clients in this other thing that I do. So I think that was a great, you're a perfect example of how you kind of navigated that and found that for yourself. But the other thing that really stands out for me in your experience is that you became a doula before having had children of your own. And I think a lot of people are really apprehensive of doing that. You know, sometimes people think, oh, I have to wait until I've had children to do it, or who would want to hire me if I'm not a parent already? So I'd love for you to speak to that experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember being in your training thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to be the only one without kids? Is that sort of silly, or will people not think I have the experience? Even though you sort of have that secondhand, you know, I have a godson, I have friends with children, and I have that real passion for birth work. But if you haven't been through it yourself, does that matter? And I think you were really encouraging for me to say, you know, sometimes it's an asset that you are more available, you have a lot more energy to give your practice, and you also maybe don't come in with preconceptions or maybe trauma of your own that can sometimes affect how you practice. So being able to start that with really fresh eyes and learn as much from my clients as they're learning from me has been really special. And now that I'm having kids, I think, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to be a doula now? It's almost harder to go the other way. But certainly I think that will add value as an experience for me being a mum. But it's been an incredible roller coaster business kind of couple of years for me, and being able to do that and really divide my attention well, that's actually been incredible. And you know, being able to do postpartum overnights, things like that. I mean, I worked with your agency while I was in Toronto, and it was just fantastic. I had so much flexibility and I made such great relationships through doing that. And I just learned so much. And certainly sometimes it's almost an asset. Like I said, I think not having your own, it just means you can be there as the doula and support that parent and their journey and wherever they're at. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was something I was a little hesitant about starting out, and I shouldn't have even worried. I had no problems getting birth clients who are still good friends of mine as well. So
amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. And so you're back in Australia now. So obviously we don't have a Donut International trainer living in Australia. We have some trainings that come down once in a while. It's not as common as it is in North America. But Donut is international, and there's lots of Donut doulas in Australia. But what's the doula market like in Australia compared to, especially having had that experience of a very, really kind of more like advanced area like Toronto in Canada?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think that was a big drive for me in seeing this opportunity to have you train in Australia. I think there is still a huge gap. There's been some studies recently just still about birth trauma and the birth landscape here, and just different models of care. And I have, even since I've been back, I've had so many inquiries, some of which I can't even take on because I'm pregnant. And, you know, there's just a lot of demand and not enough supply. Donut International has been sort of a key part of my career so far. And I think having the backing of, and I'm sure you'll speak to this about what is donor, but just having the backing of sort of a larger group and having a network of people to sort of bounce off as well has been really helpful. And certainly in Australia, I just think there's this real opportunity to support people through birth. My last 2 clients since I've been back, I've only been back a few months, but I've been to 2 births. They were both water births within a hospital setting. So that was really cool. It is a little bit different to Canada, but certainly there's the demand is very much here. So I think if I hadn't already trained, this would be like my dream opportunity, because doing a training in person is just incredible. And especially the price that this one is offered at. I don't know if you want to speak to this one particularly in Sydney, but it's really expensive here. A lot of the alternatives are almost 3 times as much. So having a little bit of change in your pocket to put towards a birth bag, or to start your own business, there's costs associated with that, and just actually start working and feel like you can just hit the ground running. For me, that was really important starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for people who are listening to this, who are new to thinking about and choosing a doula training, obviously there are a lot of doula trainings out there. I've heard that there are close to 200 now. When I started my work 20 years ago, I think there were 4. And so I didn't have very far to look to consider which one I wanted. And for me, I chose Doula International. Doula was the first certifying organization for doulas. And of course, I want to acknowledge that doulas are as ancient as mankind. And so the essence of the role of the doula has existed as long as humans have had babies. But in terms of doing a more professionalized training around it, that's a little bit newer, right? It's only been around about 30 years. And so it's grown a lot. It's also an unregulated field. And so there aren't really a lot of sort of guidelines or restrictions and what needs to be involved and what should a training look like. What I will say is that, a Doula International training is really meant to be your foundational training. It's going to get you started off on the path of working as a doula. You can begin working as a doula right after the training. Of course, if you want to become certified, if that's something that you value, that means something to you, it means something in your area, there are some additional steps to becoming certified, like getting that hands-on experience. And we talk a lot about certification, why people choose to do that. We talk a lot about how to get those first few clients so that you feel a little bit more ready to, when you leave your training, to just get out there. And really a lot of it though is I really encourage people to take that little bit of that leap, off the proverbial ledge, and to just trust that you will do a great job. Because ultimately, what makes someone a good doula that comes to a doula training is, I don't even think it's the doula training. I think it's the desire that you have in you to support others, to help others, to be of service. That part of you that has spent your whole life becoming a great friend and a good listener and an empathic person, and maybe a good partner or sibling or whatever. It's like all of those life skills are really what make us great doulas. And of course, they were the original doulas. It was our neighbors, sisters, friends, aunties who were there to surround us in birth historically. This training is the bonus material. It'll give you a little bit more like structure around what to do and how to do it, but it's already in you if you're feeling called to do this work. And you're right, Zoe, obviously we're trying to make this as affordable as possible in Australia, while still being able to cover all of my expenses to come and visit. But in your very first birth, you would cover the cost of your training, right?
Yeah, which is, I just think that is such an important aspect, is that it's not free work. You have made an incredible life out of doula work. It is almost a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's that calling, that passion that you have. And that was really interesting for me. Maybe you could speak to that for anyone watching, of just what your journey was. Like you said, when you started, there was only about four trainings available, and it was a very different landscape. Now, like, gosh, it's really, there's articles in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
There's this huge rising awareness, and the ship is starting to turn towards supporting more physiological birth and supporting the wellness holistically of the parents. So I would love to know just a little bit of a recap of your journey. You're obviously an expert in the field now and very sought after. So how did you get there? You run a whole bunch of businesses. What's kind of been your journey?
Yeah, I think I often describe that I was the accidental doula. I became a doula not with that intention, and that word wasn't even something that was really part of my vocabulary. I became a Lamaze certified childbirth educator on purpose, because I wanted to help people prepare for birth and be better informed, and have just better experiences. My own births, my first and second births, are really what kind of spawned the interest in having an informed birth. And then people started asking me to attend their birth with them, and I started doing that. And I kind of say the job took hold of my heart, and then eventually it took hold of my life. I gave up my corporate work to do this, but I worked my first 5 years of doing doula work. I worked full time. And so people who are like, oh, I'm kind of interested, but I'm not ready to give up my day job. You don't have to. You can become a doula and take 10 births a month, or you could take 2 births a year, right? Like, there's no limit and there's no rule on this, like how much you have to do to be actually a doula. Like, you can do as much as you want. And so for me, maybe I did like 6 or 8 births a year when I was working full time. And to be honest, they didn't really impact my job that much. They actually mostly didn't interfere. But that really was allowed me to get a sense for this work. And, back then it really didn't pay very well. And I say people like me, the early doulas, early modern day doulas, are responsible for a part of that, that we didn't charge enough. We didn't charge the value because we really just wanted to help people. And of course, there was a point in my life where I realized that I wanted to help people, but I also needed to make a living. And I began valuing this work that we do a lot more. And then my focus has really been on being like the business doula, the doula business doula, if you will. Like, I really want doulas to see this can be a legitimate career. You can support yourself on this work. You can be of service to others and make a living. All of these things are possible in the same life experience. And so that's a big focus of my training, as well as valuing ourselves, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves as much as we take care of our clients, and finding that balance for ourselves. And I think that's always a work in progress. But yeah, for me, everything I eat, drink, breathe, sleep, is pretty much doula related, but yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's really addictive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool to hear your journey as well. Even though I've heard that story before, it's really inspiring, and it is what you make it. We talked just briefly before about sort of you start and you kind of find where you like. I never expected to be here, but I am, and I love it, and it's almost just keeps getting so much momentum. Sometimes I can't quite catch up, which is a good feeling. But in terms of progression, we talked about some things. So like you might become some of the avenues, so photography, which I'm doing, but also postpartum work, things like, I know people that have started podcasts, nutrition. I don't know if there's, obviously you've started doula agencies, which is really interesting, the business side of things, all those sorts of areas, wellness. So it really is, I think the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to do, or become an educator even. Yeah.
Exactly. There's so many different ways, and something that we would talk about in the training, right?
Yeah.
So for anyone that's interested, please have a look at doulaschool.ca. We've got early bird special on for a couple of days from the posting of this podcast or YouTube video, and then we will close a few days before the training, close registration. So if you're interested, get in now, get in early, so that we can make sure that we have enough people to do the training. And anyone can email either of us through our businesses or Instagram accounts, wherever you see this posted, with any questions and things like that. So thanks for being here, Zoe. Thanks again for sharing with us, and we look forward to seeing you in Australia soon.
Always a pleasure, Steph. Thanks for having me.